Hello. Good day, and welcome to Power Hour Coaching. I am Bernadette Boas of Ball of Fire Coaching, and we are a leadership and development practice that works with corporate professionals who are struggling to really be the powerhouse leaders that they want to be, so they can create riches in their work and life. So, should you or someone you know really be struggling to really up their game when it comes to their leadership and their effectiveness in their role, then don't hesitate to reach out and even participate in our weekly Powerhouse coaching sessions that are live each and every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And you have an opportunity to join in, ask questions, discuss your challenge. You can post them right here below. You can even comment that you'd love to come online and talk to me directly, and I can send you, while we're here, a link for you to join me. So our main goal and objective here from Ball of Fire Coaching is to just ensure that you know that you are not alone and that there is support out there for you. And all you have to do is raise your hand and ask, okay? And if you should choose to not necessarily want to do it here publicly, then you could always also reach out to me, join me on LinkedIn, and then send me a DM. You can also just schedule some time to discuss the question or the challenge you might be having. You can go to coachmebernadetteboas.com/discovery call. All right. And it's complimentary, and all it is from start to finish, helping you move forward in your career and life. All right. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to post them, and I'll make sure that we get to them before the end of this hour. Now, the couple questions I do already have are two things. One is talking about, why do people judge and hate so much? And more importantly, because a lot of what I've seen, of course, you can go to any social media platform, but I've also seen a lot of it out on LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is a professional business platform, and it's one for individuals to get recognized, to get connected, to gain a recruiter, to gain a job, to gain a client, to gain a vendor, to gain a strategic partner. And therefore, you have to wonder, not to say that they should be judging and hating out on any of the other social platforms, but you'd have to wonder what they think that they're gaining. And what is it that their actions are actually telling people out there that could be looking for them in any of those capacities? So I also want to talk about kind of, what is the satisfaction of doing it? And what is the impact? What does it say about someone? And what is that perception? And what could be the ultimate result as it pertains to someone who is judging and hating so publicly? All right. Then the second one actually came up in a conversation. Someone reached out to me on Wisdom. If you're not familiar with Wisdom Audio, you can go to wisdom.audio, and it's almost like a clubhouse. It's a place to build a community, to go out, to have a conversation, and have others join in and just kind of collaborate and connect and relate to one another, which is so needed nowadays. So Michael joined in, and we were having a conversation about confrontation and conflict. And I'll touch on that if we have time. But what he also asked in his time with me was, then he went on and made a comment about the fact that he works for a company who uses outside recruiters. And he is definitely very challenged as the hiring manager to influence who and how this recruiter or this recruiting company that they're working with goes out and seeks out the candidates, qualifies them, and brings them on board. And he's been having issues with the people that he's bringing on board, as well as not getting the people that he would be expecting on board as quickly as he should. So we didn't have an opportunity to discuss that, though I offered for him to reach out and schedule some time to discuss it. So I thought it would be a great conversation to have here. And then I'm also going to share with you some expert who will be joining my podcast, Shedding the Corporate Bitch, on September 27th. So stay tuned, and I'll share that information as well. Or just make a note of September 27th, Shedding the Corporate Bitch. And her name is Andrea Hoffer, and she's with AHA Recruiting Experts, her own recruiting company. So if there's somebody that Michael can get connected to, which I will, it will be Andrea. But I will share with you, as a hiring manager for a long time who worked with a lot of recruiters, as well as when I went out on my own, I also worked with recruiters, initially thinking I might find a new job. But I ultimately just stayed out on my own. So I'll be not the recruiter expert, but I'll be providing it some feedback to you and some tips and advice from a hiring manager's perspective. Okay. And like I said, if we have an opportunity, we'll talk about confrontation and conflict and why so many people hate it, when actually it's a simple process if you can get your hands around it. And any other questions or challenges you might bring up and post in the comment section. Okay. All right. So let's start with why do people judge and hate so much? And this actually also got triggered from a conversation, and actually from an online streaming, going through a stream, when it came to even Queen Elizabeth's funeral procession and all the media coverage that's been going on over the last week. And there was a lot of judgment and hate thrown at Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. So the Princess and Prince of Sussex. And it all pertained to the fact that they were holding hands as they were leaving the church. And all of a sudden the haters and the judgers came out of the woodwork, commenting on the fact that they were holding hands and how inappropriate was that, so forth and so on, while there was other media coverage of other members of the royal family who also were doing the same, but yet weren't getting the judgment and the hate. But what really just kind of called out to me is this whole idea and behavior around judging and hating. Now, I am certainly not guilt-free when it comes to this subject and when it comes to this behavior. I mean, I'm just not. And I'm surrounded by individuals who I can probably count on one hand, who I've never, ever, ever heard a negative, judgmental condemnation, anything out of their mouth about anyone or anything for that matter. And when they do have something to say about an individual or about a situation or a life event, whatever the case might be, it's always put in such a way that it's almost educational or just voicing their viewpoint as opposed to judging, hating, or condemning. So you just sit there and you kind of look across the makeup of humans that are on this earth, and you just wonder, why are some in the camp of the haters and the judgers, and why are some in the camp of motivators and inspirers, and what are the differences in the two groups? And when I start to look at it, especially when I start to look at myself, when I start to look at it, it really comes down to those that judge or hate or complain a lot are really dealing with their own demons, what I call bitches in my world. But they're really dealing with their own fears and insecurities and doubts, even shame and pain, and all of those more negative emotions. And I am certainly one who I recognize that about myself. But they're experiencing these kind of negative emotions, and the safest way for them to project the opposite. They don't want to come across as fearful um, or as insecure or doubting themselves or negative. So what they do is they mask it behind, in a lot of cases, behind judgment, hate, or condemnation. And I certainly was guilty of that. I certainly was guilty of um, defending myself, feeling as if I was defending myself and protecting myself from people that might see under the covers and see how insecure or or feeling like, a low self-worth about myself. And I covered that up with calling out the ugliness of other people, other things, other events, whatever the case might be, thinking that that's protecting me. If I got to them first, right? If I got to them first and I, put that judgment out there, I put that hate out there, I put that curtness out there, then I'm kind of protecting myself from any possible wounds being revealed. And yet, when I started, even for myself and then many clients that I've worked with, really started working through shedding all of those masks, shedding all of those shields, shedding all of those defense mechanisms, it became really apparent as to why those masks, those shields, those defense mechanisms are being used. And they're masked in hate and judgment and cruelty and defamation and however else you want to describe it. And it was the fact that those individuals, myself included, were trying to cover up the fears and insecurities and negativities and doubts and feelings of intimidation and low self-worth. And that was their way of projecting. Now, okay, there's a reason for it. But then do you let them off the hook, or do you basically say, get help? And should you want that individual to get help? Even if this is hitting a nerve, then it might be telling you too that there's behaviors or words or actions that you're actually putting out there that are a response to your own fears and insecurities. And therefore, there might be work that you need to do. All right. So the satisfaction that one might get from it, and I'll only share with you my satisfaction. I won't even share, other satisfaction from my clients or whatnot. It pretty much mirrors the same. But it is a feeling of strength. It is a feeling of power. It is a feeling of gratification, as kind of sad as that sounds. But if one can kind of really be successful at masking their fears and doubts and insecurities by coming off as a bully, by coming off as a negative Nelly, by coming off as a tyrant. Well, in a moment, in an instant, they feel better. They feel stronger. They feel empowered. They feel as if they've got the win by making someone else feel like crap, or making someone else feel diminished, or by making someone else feel less worthy. Because what they're trying to do, what I spent years trying to do, is I felt down here when everybody was here. And by putting on certain masks and treating people in certain ways, it made me temporarily feel as if I was up here and they were now here. They didn't move. They're still there. But it took me from feeling low or little or not worthy or not good enough or feeling like an outcast. And it made me, for an instance, feel as if, okay, I'm in the power position. I'm in the, position of strength, and I'm going to dictate pretty much how other people feel, as opposed to having to feel what other people were making me feel, or I was allowing myself to feel by other people's actions. So it's all fear-based. It's all shame-based. It's all insecurity-based. And therefore, whether it's you or someone who is kind of constantly negative, constantly judging, constantly condemning, constantly complaining. Well, if you're close enough to and you care at all, then you might want to point it out. And you might want to ask a lot of questions about why it is that they're saying, doing, or being the way that they are. And the part we'll get to as well is I also want to talk about the impact that this type of behavior, this type of mindset has not only on the individual but everyone around them. I had apart from myself being that, for a long time, a couple of decades, one of my best friends was just someone who, if I said it's blue, she said it's black. If I said it's pretty, she said it's ugly. If I said, the world is flat, she'll say it's, a circle. So everything was a contrast, and more so on the negative, judgmental realm of contrast. And it was exhausting. It was exhausting. Now, this was acceptable to me for decades, because that's the space I was in. That's the mindset I was in. That was the foundation of my self-esteem, was being okay with the negative and the judgmental and the condemnation and the hate and the ugliness. And if you really think about it, we attract who we are, right? We attract who we are. We don't only attract, you hear the law of attraction. We don't only attract things into our life and experiences and events and encounters and situations and problems in our life based on who we are, but we also attract the people, places, and things that we are. So if one big business and life tip that many of the experts, including myself, share is the 5 people that surround you are the reflection of who you are. And if you want it to be different, if you want to be bigger, better, and more successful, then you have to circle yourself with those individuals that are where you want to be or whom you want to be. And so here I was surrounded by like-minded people, because we're attracted naturally to people that are like us. And so I started, through my shedding process, through my excavating of my soul, which we talked about on last week's Power Hour coaching. So if you wanted to go back to that episode, you certainly can. It's still in the streams of wherever you might be watching this right now. We also talked about it on this past Tuesday's Shedding the Corporate Bitch podcast. So you can always take a look for that as well, not only on your podcast streaming services, but on our YouTube channel, our Shed the Bitch TV YouTube channel. So if that's true, that what we attract in our life, people, places, and things, are a direct reflection of who we are, then you all of a sudden want to look around, you all of a sudden want to look around and decide if who you are is who you want to be, where you are, what you are, who's in your life, the things that are in your life, the places that are in your life are what is going to lift you up and what's going to serve you, as opposed to what's going to really drain and take away from you. And through my excavating of the soul that I had mentioned, I started realizing that I did not want to be that type of person. That type of person that hated, that type of person that condemned, that type of person that was negative all the time. And so as I was shedding and doing a lot of, self-development work on myself, I started seeing the world differently and being different and wanting bigger, better, and different. And therefore, what I was accustomed to was no longer attractive to me. And so the next thing you know, the disparity of, in this case, the friend I was talking about, the disparity in her being so negative and contrasting to myself became more and more and more apparent, and was just screaming at me to make a change. And so I would have you kind of, even initially think about, all right, are you where you want to be? Are you the person you really want to be? Are the people in your life, the places and the things in your life really serving you? Or do you have bigger, better, different dreams and goals for yourself, and therefore need to spend time trying to figure out what to do in regards to either shedding them, as I will always say, or definitely honoring those riches that you want to hold on to because they're serving you really well. Uh, but only until someone is kind of willing to do that and willing to do the work, that they're going to continue kind of hating, judging, condemning. Now, I've also had scriptural help, meaning that I don't necessarily read the Bible, but I read passages from Jesus Calling from Sarah Young. It's a daily devotional that has both kind of her interpretation and contribution, and then it has some scriptures at the bottom of it. And a few of them that really have stuck with me and helped me do that transformation and that excavating and that shedding is a passage of don't judge and you won't be judged. Don't condemn and you won't be condemned. Forgive and you'll be forgiven. And so that's a regular mantra I kind of use with myself as I'm going through the day, and as I find myself slipping into that ugly space. I just sit there and say, judge or don't judge and you won't be judged. Don't condemn and you won't be condemned. And forgive and you will be forgiven, because we certainly, life is a two-way street. If we're going to be out there hating and judging and criticizing and complaining, then we have to be ready to receive the same. We have to be ready to receive other people judging and condemning and complaining to us or about us as well. And of course, who's stepping up wanting that? Nobody. Nobody wants that. So the other kind of infamous passage of, treat others as you want to be treated yourself. If you don't want those things, why do you think other people are deserving of those things? And then the other one that really kind of grounds me too is serving others serves you. Now, I initially, I sat on that statement for about a couple years, because I was still shedding. I was still in this very negative, ugly space. And I thought, God, that's selfish. Just go out and serve others and that'll take care of you. And I looked at it as a very selfish thing. Kind of interpreting it like, well, geez, I don't want to just serve others because, I'll get something out of it. I want to serve others to serve others, to really enrich other people's lives. And in conversations with actually a number of you and others, I realized that that's not what that statement means. Serving others serves you certainly means that as you are giving and as you are serving others and supporting and helping, and you totally take yourself out of the equation, is when you are so filled with positivity and confidence and self-love and self-esteem, to where then any desire to judge and hate on others kind of dissipates and disappears. And so when I started really focusing there on the fact that, okay, so what this really is saying is, if I just put myself out there like here, and I'm not worried about myself, I'm not worried about if anybody's going to, necessarily, I would love you to, but necessarily reach out and book that discovery call with me. And I would love for that to happen, but not necessarily to all of a sudden make you a client, but to serve you and to help you and to give you what it is that you need at any point in time. So those are some calm scriptures, calm passages, mantras, affirmations that I use to kind of get myself out of that space, because we all get there. We all get to that headspace of judging. Now, it might not go as far as hating, but at the same time, we're human, and we go into that space. But why do we also, other than the fact that we're fearful and we're insecure and we're doubtful, but it tends to certainly be a symptom and a cause. And that would be just that we're comparing ourselves to others. We're seeing people that have what we want, and therefore we feel as if, well, I'm going to pretend I don't really want that because I don't have it and it's so hard to get it. And therefore I'm going to judge it and condemn it and hate on it. And it's merely, again, it goes back to fear and insecurities and doubts and shame and pain. So if you don't want to hold on to your fear and insecurities and doubts that cause you to possibly judge or condemn, then kind of work on the fact that you are, one, surrounding yourself with people who are lifting you up, not pushing you down. Focus on, really on a daily basis, your mindset, your state of being is a daily practice. At least it is for me. Maybe it isn't for you, but it certainly is for me. So, come up with daily practices, whatever that might be. And, I use a combination of prayer, meditation, reading, and then just constant affirmations in my head, constant resetting. The minute I go to a place that I'm doubting myself, or I'm thinking something judgmental, or I'm going to a place that is negative and is not going to serve me and certainly not going to help me move forward, then I just kind of pay attention to that. It comes to self-awareness, which does definitely take practice. and oh, I love this. And I'll get to that in a second, because I do want to read that. And just find those tools and tips and strategies and practices that will help you shift out of that space and shift into a more positive space. So we have a Facebook user who says, we get triggered by people when we see things we want in us and they have it. So I love that, because I mentioned the more materialistic things, that they have they have the business that you want. They have the career, they have the salary, they have the house, the income. But our Facebook user comment is definitely even more so that they're the type of people that we are. Or I'm sorry, they're the type of people we want to be, and we feel we're not, and therefore that triggers us. I love that. I started to experience breath techniques to help me regulate my emotional state. You know what? That's an absolutely great point. And it's probably something that a lot of people do, but don't even recognize that they're doing it. You ever hear someone say, take a deep breath, just pause, get still and take a deep breath? But I believe in Facebook user, I'm sorry to call you that, but you might, comment that it's a more involved practice, because I know that there are breathing techniques and breathing practices that, is more than just kind of sit there and breathe and take a deep breath. That there are just, exercises and practices. And I absolutely love that, because I think we take that for granted. We have, and what she's pointing out, or he, is we have naturally embedded in us the best power tool that we could be using to shift our mindset from any negative, judgmental, um, um, insecure headspace, and move it over into a more positive, uplifting, inspirational motivation. And when you're in that space, and this is what I've learned through my whole shedding process, being in that negative space for decades, it was the most liberating thing to realize that as when I am, thinking positive and optimistic and inspired and motivated and energetic, there's no room for all that other negative stuff, because I'm filling all of my space. You'd be filling all of your space with all of this uplifting, positive, almost like sunshine. And I mean, that sounds very woo-woo, especially coming from me, but yet at the same time, you don't have any room left. You don't have any room left to even want to then judge or hate or condemn or just be negative or complain, because it feels too good. I mean, it feels too good. Would you say that, Facebook user? That it just feels too good. And therefore, whether it's on, now we could talk about the fact that, social media, being online makes it really easy for people to anonymously sit behind their keyboard and just spew crap onto other people. But this is the thing, and what we started with from the beginning around the fact that what triggered this conversation and this topic was LinkedIn, was the fact that there are so many, and maybe it's you and others, there are so many that are out on LinkedIn, a business professional, client prospecting, job recruitment, partner connecting, investor generating platform. And here, many people are just, spewing that hate or judgment or condemnation or political rants or things that scream, at least for me, maybe it doesn't for you, but it screams that I would never want to do business with a person like that, because it's exhausting, it's draining, it's exasperating. And why would someone want to engage, pay, hire, date somebody like that? And so it's not that I would say take it off of LinkedIn and go somewhere else, but at the same and go somewhere else. I would never say that. Think about it. Just think about it. But more importantly, think about the fact that in so many cases, and I would say, we started off with Prince Harry and Kate Markle, or Markle, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And then I also made note, of the Kardashians, because that came up in a conversation. But anybody successful, anybody that you would look up to, anybody whose profile shows up and they're cheering and honoring their successes. And, somebody sitting behind their laptop and they're going, oh, he or she got it from whatever, from, their mommy or daddy, their wealthy parents, or their boss that they're having an affair with, or they're just, they just get lucky, and they all of a sudden, all their insecurities and fears and low self-esteem start stirring. And the next thing you know, there's a lot of judgment and hate out there. So what I would leave you with in regards to this conversation is, when those feelings come up, when those insecurities, when those negativities, when those doubts, when those feelings of not fitting in, or any degree of low self-worth starts stewing, take Facebook users' advice. Breathe, and shift yourself into something, and where you're telling yourself that you are, as wonderful, not any better or less. You are as wonderful as the next person. You are as deserving. You are as capable. You are as worthy. And make the decision as to whether or not that's true, and leverage it, and make a shift. If you have to change your circle, if you have to change the places and things that surround you, because they're draining you, they're not gaining you, then make changes. Shed, as I call it, because it's certainly not serving you in any way, shape, or form. And you deserve so much more than that, or someone deserves so much more than that. And the impact, again, is tremendous if that's the way you're coming across, whether it is online in comments and, posts and whatnot. But also, I can guarantee you, if it's coming across there, it's coming across in any interaction that you have with a complete stranger, or your boss, or a potential hire or a potential client or a potential vendor or love mate. Love mate, is that a word? So you're going to want to recognize it, acknowledge it, account for it, and shift it. Okay. All right. I got really involved in that. And I very much appreciate the comments from our Facebook user. So thank you so, so much. All right. So moving on to our next question. And again, I got this, I had this conversation, this question from Michael on wisdom. If you're not familiar with wisdom, you can go out to wisdom.audio. And it's almost, if you're familiar with Clubhouse, it's a way of someone starting a conversation just like this and others joining in. And I'll tell you what, I listened to one this morning. I'm going to divert for just a second. I listened to one this morning, and it was a woman who is handicapped. So she's disabled, her words, and she can't work. And she's pretty much kind of stuck at home all by herself. And I'll tell you what, in the little bit that I had time to listen to, this platform, or a platform similar to this, because now I understand, other than Clubhouse and Wisdom, there's also Twitter Spaces now. But these communities, these spaces, are providing a great outlet, a great way for people to connect, and especially, even more so, a place for people to relate that they're not the only one dealing with something, good, bad, or indifferent, that other people, especially other people on this multi-billion, individual earth, that there's a lot of people out there that are dealing with the same thing that you are. So anyway, that little diversion there, but you can go to wisdom.audio, and you can even check me out there and join in. And I even tried Twitter Space this morning, but that's for another day. All right. So for Michael, how can I influence the type of people recruiters are bringing to me? He actually got more involved in his explanation, and I'll kind of summarize it. His company is working for or with a recruiting company, and the positions for his team, and yet the recruiter's not necessarily engaging him and involving him, and is kind of showing up with candidates that don't meet his needs and or fit the culture. Now, before I get into this, I want to reiterate, I am not a recruiting expert. And as a matter of fact, on September 27th, I'll be having a guest, Andrea Hoffer of AHA Recruiting Experts. She'll be on my show. And we had a great conversation. We already recorded it. Great conversation all surrounding this type of subject, but also for those hiring managers out there. We talked about culture, fit, the hiring process, the interviewing process, a whole slew of topics. So it's a great, great episode. So check that out. September 27th on Blog Talk Radio, on Shedding the Bitch TV, and then, of course, on any one of the podcast streaming services out there. Okay? His overall concern was not only is the recruiter not providing him what he needs, he doesn't feel he has any influence. And he used that word. And so in the midst of our conversation around conflict and confrontation, which was the initial premise of the conversation, he kind of went into this tangent. And he said, I feel I have no influence in this process, and yet I'm going to be the one working with this individual. And so I interjected and I said, we don't have time. We didn't. But could you touch on the influence? And he just went on to say that it's kind of out of his hands. It's in the recruiters, and they're acting very independently. And he just has no kind of tenants into the whole discussion. And so I thought to myself, and I wanted to ask him, and I'm going to ask you, whose responsibility is that? Who's ultimately responsible for that happening? Is it the recruiter? Is it the hiring manager, or someone else? Because the first thing that jumped out at me is that's BS. I mean, first off, you're the client. All right. The recruiter is being paid and was hired by you or the company. And therefore, you're the client. And the client's always right. They're always right. Now, are they always right? Practically? No. That's why they have experts like the recruiter who then would help them and guide them and advise them differently. However, the client's always right as to what their needs are, how they are, what their expectations are, how they are going to be served, and what the ultimate outcome and result is meant to be. And so I would share with him that one, he needs to take control and the influence in this process with the recruiter. And I don't care how big or small this company is, how many people are in between all of them, and how big even the recruiting company is. He has the right and he's in the position to where he needs to be influencing what is happening in his recruiting process. And so that, that could start from even the initial conversations of what the expectations are, what the desired outcomes are. Even I won't get into all the fee structure and everything else, but also then, kind of what is that job profile? What will that posting look like? What is the type of questions I want you to be asking? And what are the type of output we want from the candidate to ensure that they're a fit, so forth and so on. And again, Andrea Hoffer will help all of you understand that in great detail on September 27th. So, I would ultimately want to tell him he needs to interject himself and get involved in that process and raise the concern that he has in regards to a lack of influence and a lack of the actual result that he's looking for. Because the client, him, will be not only working with this person, but paying this person and then risking that this person isn't a fit. And therefore, it's going to cost them more to actually possibly have to cut ties with them and then rehire someone else. And so the second someone, especially a client, states that they don't have influence over a vendor, all the alarms go off for me. And so please recognize that. And this also goes to, which I would get into with him, is this also goes to his own sense of empowerment, his own sense of confidence, his own sense of ownership, as far as being the client, as far as being the one who's hired this company in order to fulfill a goal and objective that he has. And therefore, he needs to ensure that he inserts himself and positions himself that way, because then ultimately the fault would not be on the recruiting company. The fault would be on that individual or those individuals involved, if there's more than just him. That if he can't, even if he's the hiring manager, but yet there's 2 or 3 other people within his own company, including HR, that, kind of like, oh, well, we've got this. We'll take what you need and we'll work with the HR. We'll be your kind of broker, your connector, so you don't have to worry about it. That's the way many, many, many companies work, but that's still the ultimate person that's going to pay for the outcome of this situation or this project is going to be that hiring manager, and therefore has to insert themselves, has to have the confidence and the not even, it doesn't even take nerve or balls. I mean, it's basically your and I'm losing the word I'm looking for. It's your place to insert yourself and to influence what it is that's happening in that process. Now, the mechanics, maybe not, but what they're doing and who they're bringing to you and whether or not it's a fit or not, and whether or not you hire them or not, you would certainly hope that the hiring manager is taking the lead there. And if not, then that needs to get kind of discussed and addressed internally and then with with that company. But lastly, again, if you are definitely interested in learning more about, how do you hire, hire, in order to get the dream team that you're looking for, then definitely join Andrea and I on September 27th on Shedding the Corporate Bitch podcast and videocast, because she's going to get into all of it. And it's a great, great conversation with loads of tips and her process and next steps that you could be taking in order to be successful in the hiring process. But I thought that was important, and I definitely think I'll shoot Andrea and Michael connection so they can even talk through it themselves. Okay, let's see. I had mentioned that if we got wrapped up early, I would talk about confrontation and conflict. And I will briefly. All right. And again, you still have an opportunity to post your comment or question in the comment sections, and I will keep an eye out for them and get them addressed for you over the next 15 minutes. But keep in mind as well, say you come back to this in replay. If you do, then I will still see those responses, see those questions or comments, and I will get to you directly with any type of feedback, tips, or strategies. Okay. So you don't just have to be here live in order to get support. Now, be sure to link in with me, and you'll get the notifications of when we are going live and when we do have these Power Hour coaching sessions or our Shedding the Corporate Bitch podcast, which does go live Tuesdays at noon Eastern time. At the same time, then they go across all the different platforms and YouTube on Shedding the Bitch TV. So you're not just limited to what's happening right here, right now. Okay. Confrontation and conflict. Oh, let me mention this real quick. We are relaunching, and I'm very excited, Ball of Fire coaching. And we announced that over the last week or so. And therefore, I put out a short, powerful ebook called The 3 Must-Have Myths to Be Successful. So these are myths that, if you've been in business for any amount of time, and when I say in business, working for yourself or for someone else for any amount of time, you've probably have heard these beliefs, these practices that over time we've all learned that they are definitely myths. You do not need to adhere to them. And therefore, I then give you tips as to what you really need to be doing in order to be successful, in order to get recognized, and in order to get rewarded for the contribution that you're making. So you can always go to balloffirecoaching.com and download a copy of that very short, very brief, but powerful ebook. All right. Okay. So the confrontation and conflict, what I would share with you immediately in regards to this, because it came up as a result of a number of my clients really struggling to kind of confront individuals on their team, especially with performance reviews, and provide them difficult, hard feedback. And yet, not only is it their job, but it's from a leadership perspective, it's an absolute expectation that they're going to support their employees in such a way that they give them that candid feedback, and the employees deserve to know, good, bad, or indifferent, that feedback. So that's where this topic of conversation came up. And that's why we also had it on Wisdom yesterday, because it continued to come up in some other client coaching sessions this week. And so I shared my 4 P's of really turning to love confrontation. Now, initially people are like, well, I don't even like the word confrontation. I like disagreement. Fine. If confrontation just kind of like scares you off and disagreement is more, acceptable, fine. But don't diminish what it's about. Don't diminish the importance and the value of what it is. You can't create, you can't innovate, you can't change, you can't grow without having confrontation in your life. It could be, between family members. It could be, between children, parent. It could be between boss and employee. It could be between a project team. It could be between, an inventor and a money person. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't move ahead and you don't advance and grow if we don't have confrontation. Now, there's a difference between, unhealthy confrontation and healthy confrontation. But once you get your arms around how to have healthy confrontation, then it's merely problem solving. So if you really want to feel good about the process and the practice of it, then call it problem solving, because that's what it is. Confrontation only happens when there's a problem and that needs to get solved. It could be an argument in the middle of the grocery store, or, out in the dog park. And you come across, somebody, with a dog off leash, and you don't like dogs. And the next thing you know, there's this, sudden interruption of confrontation or problem solving. How do I solve this problem that I don't like dogs off leash? There's a dog off leash. I'm afraid that dog's going to come and attack me. And so I need to get this addressed with that individual. All right. So it could, span in very different ways. So what are the 4 P's? Well, the first one would be, and it would have helped if I wrote them down so I don't forget them on you. But the first one would be P for plan. So whether it is a sudden eruption or it's something that's stewing over time, you have an opportunity to plan. If it's a sudden eruption, you certainly have time to, and I'll tie back to an earlier conversation, to breathe. To really kind of ask yourself, is this really the fight that I want to fight today? Or is this something that I can just kind of walk away from and keep my sanity? So, planning can go as simple as that, or it can go all the way to, okay, I have to put a plan together to address this issue, to solve this problem. I need to really think through, what is the problem? What is the impact? Good, bad, or ugly? What is the desired outcome I want from it? Okay. So that's, a lot of planning can go into anybody even giving performance reviews. Okay. So what's the plan? How am I going to approach it? What am I going to initially say? What are the questions that I want to be asking? What is the result that I want from it? What are going to be the next steps that I'm going to propose? So forth and so on. So plan. The next one would be prepare. Prepare is different than plan in that you have your plan and now you have to prepare. You prepare yourself mentally. You prepare the logistics, where you're going to meet, when you're going to meet, how you're going to meet. You can prepare what it is that you're going to say and when you're going to say it and how you're going to say it. So there's a lot there. You can prepare the other person if it's something that's been stewing, so forth and so on. So plan and then prepare. The next thing, especially if you have even 5 minutes, let alone 5 seconds, is practice. And this is the one that if more people did it, especially managers and leaders in business, if you would practice this more, you would feel very comfortable with problem solving, with disagreement, with confrontation, even conflict, by just practicing it. That could be yourself talking into a mirror. That could be setting a situation up with a friend or a colleague. That could be getting coached, whatever the case might be. And you practice how it is, what it is, and, kind of what the end point will be. So how it is that you're going to approach this, what it is you're going to say, or what it is you're going to expect, and then what your approach is going to be. You can just practice that, and practice it. You can also just practice it. And this is the most powerful, simple tip I give clients is you practice it on a daily basis. Trust me when I say you go out in the world from the moment you get up in bed to the moment you kind of like lay back in bed. And there's going to be something that you're going to have to problem solve or confront. I mean, it could be at the gas station and, something's going to come up. All of a sudden you go to the gas station and you get to a pump and the pump's not working, and now you're getting frustrated and agitated, and maybe it's not even taking your credit card, and now you have to go inside. That's confrontation, because something's about to happen. And it's a matter of between the planning and the preparing, let alone practicing, what is going to be your approach. And I need to say throughout all of this is you absolutely want to be thinking about it as a win-win situation. Going back to that conversation of hate and judgment and condemnation, you don't need confrontation to be ugly. Confrontation, problem solving, disagreements, conflict, it should have a win-win element to it. So in your planning and preparing, and then you're practicing, you're thinking about, okay, so what's in it for the other person? Because also thinking about what's in it for the other person and what kind of outcome do I want for that other person in a positive way also takes the anxiety and the stress of it all. Because now you're looking to ensure that that other person walks away feeling good about even the hardest, most uncomfortable conversation. So, through this, you're definitely wanting to think about, okay, what's in it for them? And therefore, how do I approach it and how do I set it up and what that ultimate outcome is going to be based on that. At the same time, what is my win and what do I want to achieve from this? And how do I want to be able to walk away feeling good and kind of satisfied and empowered? So you need to be thinking about the win-win, but you have an opportunity every day of your life to be practicing, confronting, problem solving, or disagreements. And the more you practice, the more comfortable that you'll get with it. Okay. And then the last P is just pursuing it. Pursuing it is doing it. So many people will avoid, ignore, delay, totally delete, as if, that never happened and I don't need to actually confront it. Excuse me. And therefore, nothing gets done. Well, you don't want those to fester, whether it's for 5 minutes, 5 years, or 20 years. You want to pursue it and kind of put it behind you. Now, in the element of pursue, I would also want you to kind of assess post. And that's what I probably need to make a fifth P, post, because you want to assess kind of what is the outcome. How did you handle it? How did the other person handle it? What was said, what wasn't said? Was it a productive, effective encounter, interaction, or, did it go off the rails? And why did it go off the rails? And so if you really want to get comfortable being uncomfortable and dealing with, difficult conversations, difficult situations, disagreements, then really look at each time you go and pursue a confrontation, really assess it afterwards. Throw away what didn't work and keep what did work and modify, adjust, or some of those things that you might think about throwing away, actually, you might say, okay, I just didn't handle it the way I wanted to, but I still want to use it. And you practice it the next time. And then ultimately you want to test and fail fast. So if something doesn't work, and I learned this, actually not learned it, it was echoed in a pickleball coaching session I had the other day with one of the pros. And she said, 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐤, and she said, what I will do is when I get on the court, if I've tried something twice and it didn't work, I don't try it again. I kind of replace it with something else. And I actually do that with things like what we're talking about. And so test and fail fast is what I call it, but test and fail fast. And then just don't repeat. That's insanity, right? And just don't repeat. So that was the overall gist of dealing with confrontation and how to learn how to really get comfortable with it. All right. Okay. So I appreciate you so much for being here. And don't forget, if you ever want to have some complimentary time where all it's devoted to is understanding your question or your challenge that you're having, the opportunity you have, or the decision you're trying to make, and giving you tips and strategies, then, definitely book a 30-minute complimentary call with me at coachmebernadette.com/discovery call. And we do this each and every Thursday at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And so join in each and every week. And we do have our Shedding the Corporate Bitch podcast at noon on Tuesdays. All right. So thank you, everybody. And I will see you next week. Take care. Bye.